Good evening and welcome to the Savage Universe stream on all of the Pinnacle channels. I am JM, and with me tonight is Justin. Justin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, awesome. We actually got to talk during September during the Swagtember focus, and great to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So we're here to talk about not only your Savage Worlds swag product, the Mysteries of Eleusterion. I'm hoping that I got all of the nuance in the title there, but also the fact that you are really focused on running kid-friendly games, providing kid-friendly scenarios and worlds to dig into and get new kids into the hobby.
Yep, I'm definitely into that. You are too. It's something we share in common.
Yeah, we were actually talking just before this. You ran some things. I've done a couple of kids' nights, and I'm going to be doing hopefully a Savage Worlds club at my son's middle school. And if that goes well, they said that it'd be like a reoccurring club every year. So hopefully that's something that
I would love to be a part of that when I was in middle school. It almost makes me want to go back to middle school now, although there wasn't much I liked about middle school that I would want to go back for. But a Savage Worlds club definitely would do it.
Right. I got into gaming in middle school. I remember it was GURPS. Some guy at the lunch table was like, "Hey, do you want to try this game? It's called GURPS." And I'd never heard about role-playing games, even though I owned a role-playing book. Heroes Unlimited by Palladium. I knew I could make superheroes with it. I did not realize there was a game to be played there until I finally got to play in a GURPS game, and it all kind of clicked, and my brain was set on fire, and my imagination exploded, and I've been running games. Like that first game we played was just awful, like so bad that at the end of the week I went home and was like, I think I can do better. And so that's
how bad? What do you mean bad? Describe bad.
No. Carl, if you're watching this, we've had this discussion, so I'm not throwing you under the bus. The GM, and again, we were 7th graders because I think I was the last year in Chicago that grade school went to 6th grade, and then they had junior high. And so when I hit 7th grade, suddenly it was 6th, 7th, and 8th, and it was called middle school. So I was only in, junior high, middle school for 2 years. Carl had this thing on rails and we would say, well, we want to do this. No, you can't do that. But it says on my character, no, you can't do that. And I was like, but why would it say on my character sheet that I could do that? And it was just that, Carl was new to it too. And he did not know. He was not good at the improv side of it. And so we played what essentially was, remember the old Zork games?
I remember Zork.
Space, where if you typed in something that the computer did not have pre-programmed, you could not take that action. Right. Now imagine that in a role-playing game. We could only do the things that Carl had imagined would happen in the scenario.
So you're more of a passive participant in his story. Yes. Instead of actively working on building the story together.
Yes. And so I got home. I remember leaving on Friday going, I don't know that I would want to play in that game again, but he let me borrow the book. And I spent all weekend coming up with my own thing. I was like, could we try this? And then that started my tenure as kind of the forever GM.
And you never looked back.
I never looked back, but I'll be honest, like looking back, man, my games in junior high and high school were awful, but we had fun, and that's where we went from there. So, tell us about. So I wrote an article on Savage Universe. If you guys are following Savage Universe, you can follow it.
It was a great article.
Oh, thank you. It's a great setting. I love the swag product you put out. I'm going to pull the map up. Why don't you introduce people to it if they haven't read the Savage Universe article and haven't picked it up yet?
Okay. Well, I have been playing role-playing games with adults for a while, and I don't really care for too much of the combat. I don't really care for too much of the gore and the violence. I mean, once in a while you have fun with it, but I wanted something that was a little more kid-friendly to play with my daughter, who is still too young to play it. I jumped the gun on writing it. But at the time when I started, I didn't realize how long it was going to take me to do it. It took me over 6 months from start to finish to work on it, but I didn't know it wasn't going to take me 6 years. I had no idea. So I basically wanted to come up with a way to get her excited and interested in role-playing games. As you know, she's 4 now. I figured, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. How do you get them into stuff? Well, what am I into? I'm into the things that I already know, things that I already like. I'm into Star Wars, and I'm into Lord of the Rings, and I'm into those franchises and properties, and intellectual property that's been in my life since I was 3, 4, 5 years old. So what is she going to be into? Yeah, I could do some copyrighted Star Wars game that she might like, because I'm getting her into Star Wars, obviously, as all good dad Star Wars fans should.
Yes.
But I thought more in terms of her wheelhouse would be fairy tales and nursery rhymes. So I, dug back into that well, and we have Eleusterion is this continent you're looking at now, and the center, all the green, is basically called the Kingdom of Grimm,
which I loved.
Which, you, as you can guess, it's a bunch of Grimm fairy tales, and there's some Mother Goose stuff thrown in, and it's all mixed and mashed together. Like I mixed some stuff up and added some new content and made it playable, basically. None of the originally, my first draft was you had to pick one of the fairy tale characters, and then I realized that quickly that wasn't going to work, because just like you said with your 7th grade session, you're kind of railroaded in if you have to play the characters, because the stories. Even the kids know the stories. Yeah. They know that Little Red Riding Hood is going to go to the cabin in the woods, and she's going to see the wolf and blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to fight the wolf. So then what I did was I said, okay, well, just like Dungeons and Dragons does, you create characters that are rubbing elbows with the people in this world. So Grimm is populated by NPCs who resemble some of the fairy tale characters that the kids will be familiar with. So it's almost like you're taking your players, who are the kids, are going to be engaging with characters from their stories, their favorite stories.
Yeah.
So if you're the kind of parent that reads fairy tales to your kids at night before bed as bedtime stories, since they were 2 or 3 years old, by the time they're 6, 7, and 8, they're very well versed in who the characters are, what their motivations are, what they want, what they need. And all of that is kind of in the subtext of the setting, but it's not overtly out, come right out and said, because I wanted to give the plot point campaign Savage World style, where it's not really railroad and it's not sandbox, it's somewhere in the middle. And so that's what I did. So the first book is a plot point campaign. There's a major arc that goes through it that is a 5, I don't know what word would you use when there's a main arc and then there's a bunch of side quests and things.
I think the plot point has 5 main stories in it.
Right.
And then you have what, 11 over a dozen Savage Tales, which are your kind of side stories.
Yeah, I think there's more than that.
Yeah.
That's about right. Yeah, I would say.
By the way,
Keith
12. Said that it's a beautiful map, and Padre, welcome. Padre is a good friend of mine. Who's like, the nights are grim, dark.
Nice.
Well done.
Yeah, so there's, like you said, there's about 12 to 15 Savage Tales, and then there's the plot point campaign.
Yeah.
And it all takes place in that center area. If you're looking at the map, the Grimm. And then my plan is, after play testing it a bunch and polishing it up, I'm going to re-release a new version of it that has expansions that bring you up north to the white area and to the south in the brown area. And my hope is to pull from international kids' fairy tales and nursery rhymes.
I see that the northern land is called the Kalevala, and I have a deep and abiding love for Wainamoinen and Lemminkainen and what's the Sanpo, the magical device that produces golden grain. I love the Kalevala.
Yeah, so that's going to be up there, and Mizoso's the southern one, so that's going to be a lot of African based and Asian based nursery rhymes and fairy tales. So I'm going to kind of swirl it all together. And then obviously there's going to be there's the sea over to the right, to the east.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be some water-based things too, sunken ships and underground Atlantis-like settings. So it's all going to get swirled together and mixed up, and it's kind of like a mashup, a mixtape. I used to make mixtapes. I don't even know if kids know what mixtapes are nowadays, but I was just trying to explain to my daughter what mixtapes were last night. I used to make those all the time.
It's like a custom Spotify playlist, but you had to actually like record it onto like a physical thing and give it to somebody. So it was more personal.
It was more personal. It was more meaningful.
So one of the things I loved, so some of my favorite games that have been set in a canon universe, or what I would call story adjacent. So I think of my buddy Christopher ran an amazing Star Wars game where we discovered like the main second arc of the game was us getting access to the generators and delivering them to Hoth before, so we were the ones who provided the shield generators. And then the third act was stealing the Imperial shuttle that they used in Return of the Jedi.
That's fun.
I think of the Wheel of Time role-playing game. They had this campaign called Prophecies of the Dragon, and it covered the first 3 or 4 books, but essentially you were always kind of off here in the periphery, and the main stuff was going off where you could see it. But they basically, we were talking about this beforehand, they kind of pried the story open and said, well, we never know why X happens. Let's have the players do that because X directly influences the story without you having to, the Dragonlance fallacy where, listen, you're going to play the Dragonlance characters, and if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then the world ends. So you were like,
right,
on rails.
Right. I didn't know there was a Wheel of Time role-playing game.
So Wizards did it. It was a 3.5 book done by Stephen Long of Hero Games, and it was fantastic. I think it is possibly my favorite version of 3.5 D&D. If you could still get it, like you could play Ogiers, you could play Wilder, and the Aiel.
Did you read the books?
Oh yeah, multiple times. I'm actually listening through them again.
Are you really? Did the game go into the foxes and the snakes? Because that was my absolute favorite part of that series.
Sadly, no.
And they barely touched on it at all.
Yeah. And I mean, it ends up being this like major plot point that kind of happens off screen. I never felt like it was well resolved. James, GM James has the Wheel of Time's role-playing books. They were great. There were only 2 books. And I mean, you could go crazy. You could play a male channeler, and they had rules for like every time you used your channeling ability, your like corruption score would slowly creep up. It was great. Anyway, what I loved about Eleusterion is, like you said, like you took some of the very familiar things and put them in there in a way that if you're familiar with the fairy tales, you would know kind of what's going on, but you gave them a savage twist. So the Big Bad Wolf, which appears in multiple sort of fairy tales, is the Big Bad Wolf game.
Yep.
I loved Snow White, Wight.
That's one of my favorites, actually.
That was great. Like I read that and I laughed out loud, and my wife was like, "What are you reading?" I'm like,
"That's like hashtag dad joke," but Yeah, Snow White was my favorite of the ones I did. I was definitely story adjacent is a good word for it. That's exactly what I was going for. I spent a great many years in my late 20s, early 30s immersed in the MMO for Lord of the Rings. And as you're playing that, you're kind of story adjacent because the Fellowship kind of like there's hints that they're around there with you, but you're not actually doing anything to help really.
Yeah, you're kind of behind them, right?
Yeah.
I played that all the way through Moria, and then the Lothlorien expansion, and I think I got into Rohan, and then I had a kid, and then
that's what happened to me.
My biggest regret is still not buying the lifetime pass that they had when it came out, because all of my friends are like, "Hey, let's go play this again." I got all of the new expansions because my coins have just been racking up, and I'm like, no.
Yep. I have the lifetime, and I still never play it.
Oh, well, there you go.
You know, they went to that free model where, you know,
Mhm.
everything in game you have to pay for, but you can play the game for free. And I'm just like, well,
Okay.
what's the point of the lifetime thing then?
Yeah, I mean, you get the store credit, like they give you like monthly free coins, or anyway. Neither here nor there.
Yeah. Story
So
adjacent, right?
uh, James, GM James of the Knights of the Smith Dinner Table, just said now they need to do. He's going to try and do a Savage Wheel of Time. Yes.
That would be great.
If you, for those of you who don't know who Knights of the Smith Dinner Table are, go check out their actual plays. They are some of the best Savage Worlds actual plays out there, and they're doing Reign of Winter, which is a very Russian mythology fairy tale inspired Pathfinder AP that they're converting to Savage Pathfinder, which has just been phenomenal.
It's really not that hard to do, actually.
No,
It's easier going from something complicated like Dungeons and Dragons and converting it into Savage than it would be the other way around.
100%. So let's see here. John Doom just said, what's nice about the Wheel of Time role-playing books is that while there were only 2 of them, I don't know that they were each was 3,000 pages.
Well, that goes with Robert Jordan.
I saw somebody did a burning wheel, like a burning wheel of time. So burning wheel is a role-playing game, and they had a trait. So every character can have traits, and if your trait comes up in a story, you get the meta currency. But they had one called "Not in This Book" because it was, sorry, Matt's not in this book. He's still buried under a wall. And you're like, I just want to know what happens to Matt. I think this was the first time through. A buddy of mine and I are doing a reread together, and he was like, I just figured it out that Jordan, he keeps splitting the party and then bringing them back together. He's literally weaving their story threads together.
Because he's like a loom.
I didn't think of that. Yeah,
I didn't think of it either.
That's brilliant. Okay, so you are also an author, and you have several books on Amazon, which I'm going to link to right now. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. I mean, we talked about it last time for anyone that's tuning in again. But I'm a kids author. I write different types of books for different age groups, and I basically write whatever comes to my mind. So the 2 books that are published now, the first one is a middle grade realistic fiction. It's kind of like an anti-bullying book called Don't Mess with Coleman Stoops, about a big dork like me when I was 11 or 12, who wasn't popular. Nobody really respected him, didn't have a lot of friends. And then a couple of things happen, and he gets himself into trouble, but then gets himself out of it and has a happy ending. And it's a good, uplifting book about a kid that hopefully the readers can relate to, that's semi-autobiographical. Okay. And my other book is a collection of children's poetry that's sort of reminiscent of Shel Silverstein and Dr. Seuss. That was a lot of fun to write, and it's a lot of fun to read. So some of Shel Silverstein stuff is a little younger. My book, it's called Pizza and Pixie Dust, and it's some of it's for younger kids, but some of it's a little bit older. So I would say, some of the subject matter might be for 10, 11, 12-year-olds or even teenagers. So it's got a little bit of everything in there.
Excellent. Well, I've got the links in the chat there. I figured we'd take the last little bit of the stream to, one of the things that you are, and we've bonded over this, is this idea of how do we get kids more into gaming? And for those of you who have it,
who has ideas?
World, where is it? It's the Savage World's World Builder and Game Mastering Guide. This book here has a little section on Savage Worlds for all ages, written by none other than Jody Black, and she did a great job. Breaking it down. Yeah, great. When you're running for this group level, here's what you should focus on. Right? If you're running for young kids, keep it simple. Use colored coded dice, so all of the D4s are yellow and all of the D6s are red, so they can very quickly.
Benny's for sitting still.
Benny's for sitting still, taking a wiggle break.
Taking turns, right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the wiggle break I had to use in
I want to know how many kids she had to play with to come up with those rules, because they're phenomenal.
They're so dialed in for each age group. James just said, hey, new books to read to my toddlers. There you go. Yeah. So what has your experience been bringing kind of thinking about bringing kids in the hobbies? What are things that you really
Well,
focus on and think are important? As we as GMs, a lot of us, especially kind of, DM James is talking about this. I know I've talked with John Doom. We're now our kids are getting old enough to kind of bring into the hobby. What are the things that you would say, hey, focus on these, and these are there's some pitfalls to avoid?
oh man, that's tough. That's a tough question. I mean, every group of kids is going to be different. Every age group is different. Unfortunately, my experience, I've had some false starts and some misfires. I was in my mind, it always is idealistic, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to get a bunch of kids. We're going to put the phones down, and we're going to sit in front of around the table, and we're going to roll some dice and tell a story together, and everyone's going to love it, and they're going to be engaged, and they're going to laugh and have fun, and we'll have pizza, and it'll be fantastic. And then you sit down at the table, and it's just those awkward silences, and it's like, oh gosh, they don't really know what to do, and I haven't been game mastering as long as you have. So I'm kind of like fumbling through it, especially with that age group. You play with, 20 somethings or 30 somethings or 40 somethings. And there are those awkward silences where people are taking a minute to process and figure out what to do. Or you get a new group of people together who've never played before. And suddenly it's like awkward because you don't really know who's who or what to say. But that gets like exponentially increased when you have a group of awkward kids that have never done it before.
Yeah.
And as much as I really have this picture in my head of, the opening scene in E.T., where the kids are sitting around the dining room table, like, oh, who ordered the pizza, man? Go get the pizza, like all that. Like, I want that. And I found that a lot of the kids, they're just so focused on zoning out in front of a screen that they don't really understand the social interaction part of tabletop role-playing games, which is a double-edged sword because number one, it makes the gaming harder. But on the flip side, it's one of the reasons I wanted to get into this to begin with.
Yeah. It's not I think so much of the entertainment we have today, even in video games, and I just started another playthrough of Elden Ring because that game is essentially a fever dream that I love. Is still passive. Right? It's passive entertainment. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to watch this. Right. I'm going to sit down and engage with this pre-programmed video. Even open world games, there's still limits. You can't do whatever you want. You can only do what was created within the mind of the programmers. And yes, we're getting games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring, where the programmers have done their best to give you as much as they can. But role-playing games is a very active, it's an activity. It's not, in the truest sense of the word, you have to participate. You have to be active. The GM isn't there to sort of spoon feed you the story.
Right. And it's even worse than that because it's not just the passivity of sitting in front of a screen. If you're sitting in front of a screen being passive, the people who created the content for you, whether it's a movie or a TV show or a video game, have done all of the imagining for you. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is absorb it. Whereas, you're sitting at the table, suddenly now it's theater of the mind. And how developed is the muscle of your mind as far as the imagination goes and creativity? Can you, whether you're an adult or a kid, can you sit there and come up with something that is fun or funny or appropriate or strategic, in this situation that the game master has put you in? And I find that it gets harder for that situation is harder the younger you go. Mm-hmm. So if you're playing with a group of kids that are 15 to 17, it's going to be a lot easier than if you're playing with 10 to 12 year olds.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays with the screen, at all the screens.
Yeah. I actually had one kid at a table that I just did recently who pulled out his iPad about halfway through. And while
to do something for the game, or just because who tuned out?
Nope, he tuned out except when it was his turn. And I'm at a public place. I'm doing this as kind of a paid event, so I did what I could to say, hey, like, this is not screen time. This is here for something else. And I think he just maybe was a little anxious, a little neurodivergent, whatever you want to say. So I just finally was like, all right, I'm going to let you do this and engage when you're here. I think one of the big things that I have found successful for that, and I do this with my players. There used to be a really good podcast called the Sons of Cryos. They got me into a lot of indie games. Like I really loved listening to Judd and Storm and Jared. I don't remember who the other guy was. Sorry if somehow you ever watched the Sons of Cryos. Know that I loved your podcast, and also sorry that I forgot your names. But they were like, listen, anytime the game grinds to a halt, one of the things they did is they called it a bang. They were like, bang, someone kicks in the door and something exciting happens. So with Savage Worlds, I'm able to use like a dramatic task. I mean, obviously combat is the easiest thing to get someone invested, because now they have to focus on a life or death situation. But with younger kids, we don't always want to like throw them into there. So
honestly, the dramatic tasks are some of my favorite aspects of Savage Worlds. They're the greatest.
Yeah.
And when I wrote Mysteries of Eleusterion, I wanted to give people options. So I wanted to create the plot point campaign so that you could theoretically, as a game master, a parent, get your kids through the entire story without ever fighting anything.
That's awesome.
It's possible. I wrote it that way. But I also put stats in the back just in case somebody wants to beat on the big bad wolf gang too.
Yeah.
So
well, all right. So one of my favorite mechanics that you put into Mysteries was the wish mechanic, because wishes are such a core part of fairy tales. So let's take a step away from the kid focused gaming. But I will point this in there. I'm going to say, like, maybe we can give our top 5 ideas for parents who want to get kids into gaming here at the end. But can you explain the wish mechanics to everybody and kind of explain why you crafted them the way you did? I think they're brilliant.
I wanted there to be some type of a magical power element to the game, but I didn't want it to be your standard, oh, here's just a list of spells that your casters can do. So I created a couple of different fairy tale-esque magical systems in the setting. Wishes is one of them. Curses is one of them. And it's the way I figured it is, if the kids aren't going to be able to come up with their own stuff, there's a bit of randomization in there. So it's kind of like a roll of the dice and see what happens, and then improv it based on what happens with the roll of the dice. So the wishes is, you make a wish, and it's up to the game master to decide whether or not that wish is appropriate. And then if he thinks it is appropriate, the game master can roll to determine how the wish is fulfilled, or if it's fulfilled at all.
Yeah.
And if it's not appropriate, the game master can just say, no, you're not going to do that. That's not a good wish, or automatically, fail, whatever. It's up to the game master. But
I mean, if you think about all of the fairy tales, right? And we were talking a little bit about this before the stream, that wishes are such a core part of fairy tales, and more often than not, they're a warning. They're a warning against leaning into, trusting in things that you don't quite know, or believing that, hey, this one thing, if it changed, then my life would suddenly be perfect.
Right.
And I love the way you put those wish mechanics together.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back. I mean, from a I guess sociological standpoint, like, we've as a people have always been fascinated by, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or making the deal with the devil, or all that stuff. You never know what you're going to get with it, though.
Right. The cursed ring, or
right.
I mean, you go all the way back to Plato, and you have right, the ring of, oh, my brain's going to die. Basically the ring of invisibility, and what it would actually do to somebody to not have to face yourself in the mirror and look at consequences. So on the surface, it looks amazing. But right. I mean, this goes all the way, the picture of Dorian Gray, and all of the, the fae folk of Celtic and Norse mythology.
Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Oh my gosh, Darby O'Gill and the Little People. I love it. Leprechaun, going back to
all that stuff. So I mean, I tried to come up with a way with both the curses and the Fabled, which is a new Arcane background, and the Wishes. I tried to take some of the pressure off of the setting itself and some of the pressure off the players and give a little bit more control or randomness to the game master or just the dice,
Right.
Or the cards. I think one of them's cards. You pull the card and that's what you get. And if you pull a 2, you're only kind of cuckoo. But then if you pull a queen, you're like completely hexed. So I'm.
Yep. Like, again, I'm going to post the link here at the end of the stream. If you like fairy tales and are looking for a great kid-friendly savage fairy tale setting, check out Mysteries of Eleusterion. It is a ton of fun. You get the beautiful map. It's about 107 pages, just chocked full of great material.
And there's more coming. I can't promise when, but there's more coming. So
we have a great chat going on. John, I almost said John Doom. I said Plateau, not Play-Doh. And we have this hive mind that is going on. Kids do love Play-Doh, especially Extruder. Yeah. No,
well, next time you'll say Socrates. So.
That's right. Right.
Or Aristotle.
Take that, John. I saw a T-shirt that they have these fun history T-shirts, like a picture of Lincoln, and it says, whatever theater it was, Yelp review, 1 star, would not go again. But the one I love is mediocrities. That's his quote. This is a picture of like a Greek philosopher, and the quote is, good enough. Mediocrities.
Is he on his news feed on Facebook or something?
I don't know. If you are, I know you said you've had some success, some failures. What would your top 3 pieces of advice to a dad who's like, I really want to get my kids into role playing, or hey, my son or daughter have a bunch of friends and I'm just tired of them coming over and sitting down in front of the Switch. I'd like to get them engaging or engaged in their imagination. What would your top 3 pieces of advice be?
My first advice would be to be prepared, because kids are going to be able to sniff out if you have no idea what you're doing and you're fumbling around. So figure out a game plan first. And then don't give up. If you don't get them the first time, just keep bringing it up and trying to get them. Even if you have to I don't want to say bribe them, but even if you have to bribe them, get pizza, get sodas, if you're a health food nut, get some good healthy food in there, whatever. Just get them at the table.
Yep.
And then once you're there, just try to have fun. Just make it as fun as possible. You need to be positive and you need to have fun, and the kids are not going to want to do it if it's not fun. And if you're stressed out, if you're one of those game masters that like you're saying, your buddy back when you were a kid, it's just insisting that they do the railroad thing. The kids aren't going to go for that. Nope. Just try to make it fun, and realize that the best way of getting kids excited about something is just letting them see you excited about it first. Model. So if your kid hasn't started RPGing yet or whatever, and they see you downstairs sitting at the table with some friends doing it, or they see you with the books open writing things down and writing it, and you're excited about it and it's something you love, they're going to want to love it too. Yeah. They're going to be curious and they're going to want to be interested and they're going to want to participate.
Yeah. I think that's the key, is showing your kids how much fun you're having with it. I mean, Zane loves Torg and now Savage Worlds because I'm such a big fan of Torg and Savage Worlds. He's got his own Savage Worlds book now, and he's trying to convince his friends to play after school. I think the other thing that you said that I completely agree with is, hey, you need to be flexible. You have the fact that kids are going to come up with off-the-wall things just to see if you're going to be willing to go through with it. So I was running a BX D&D game for one of the groups of kids, and one of the kids was like, my character's name is
Poopy Pants.
Humongoid or something like that, and he's a big sumo wrestler. And so he was like, can I roll down the hallway and see if I trigger any traps? I was like, my gut was, if an adult had tried that, I was like, no. But again, it's a kid's game, so I was like, sure, you can give it a shot. And he made an amazing roll, and he set off all the traps as he was rolling down this hallway as kind of some sort of
massive snowball.
And they had fun going, hey, I can try these off the wall things. And eventually, like, I would, maybe if I was playing in a campaign with kids, I'd let them get away with it the first 3 or 4 times and then say, okay, now that your imaginations are going, you can't do that, but can you give me another idea that would work here? And see if I could kind of get them thinking within those creative bounds. Yes, Tink, you do. And he went, yeah, Sumo Chungus was his character's name. Delightful.
Nice.
So, well, here's the link to Mysteries of Eleusterion. Again, 107 pages, just chock full of very creative retellings of fairy tales. $14.99 on drive-through. Go check it out. And yeah, like when you expand it again or have new stuff, just let me know. I'd love to have you back on the show and continue talking about this with you.
I definitely will.
Any final thoughts before we sign off for tonight?
You didn't tell me what your top 3 advice for parents getting their kids in.
So the first one, I would agree with you, like the be flexible, like, just be prepared and be flexible. I would say be very, very generous with bennies. If a kid, patiently waits their turn, if you say, if someone, because a lot of times kids are going to want to talk at all times. And if you're like, hey, it's not your turn yet, let this other person go. And they go, oh, I'm sorry. I would give them a Benny and reward them. Like, I think how do I want to put this? Some games without meta currency, your real reward is usually negative, right? Oh, you touched that door without checking for traps.
Right. Oh, here we go. Yep.
Now you're learning through negative reinforcement. Savage Worlds with bennies, or really any game with a physical token that you can, like, physical tokens are always fun, especially if you get like a piece of candy and you can give, or something you can hand to the kid and say, hey, this is a benny, and you can eat it when you spend it. But it's a positive reinforcement. Hey, you're doing something that is adding to the group. Let me give you a benny for that. John says it works for adults too.
It does.
My problem is I end up rewarding the wrong things at the table. Like when someone makes bad puns or makes me laugh, I give them bennies. And then I'm like, why is my game just full of Monty Python jokes? Oh, right. It's Pavlovian at this point. Yep. So those two things. And then I would say, if a kid, this kind of goes back to being flexible. If a kid wants to try something crazy, whether it's a character or a change to their character or something in game, don't just allow them to, but like reward them for their creativity. And it kind of ties into the first two, I guess. Because the whole point is, hey, we really want kids to realize this is some of the most rewarding entertainment they can ever interact with.
Ever.
And then number 4, I'd be eyeing a kid to who wants to take over and GM. Like, see who you can see who could be the person that you could hand this off to and say, all right, now, hey, next time it's your turn to come up with a story. Yep. I'll be here to help you.
Pass the baton.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I tend to forget, is because I love GMing. So it's like, hey, Zane's like, can we play this? I'm like, sure, get your friends over, we'll play. And I need to be like, all right, yeah, but if you want to do it this time, why don't you run it for your friends? Because that way, then there's more DMs in the world. And, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master something. Well, if I can get Zane DMing at 11, he's going to hit that mastery level way sooner than I did. And we'll have to go through all of the bad stories of my GMing in high school and early college.
And then he'll turn into the next Critical Role.
Right? Then I can retire when my son is the Matt Mercer of Savage Worlds. I will provide you, James, with a clip for reasons. I can see that for reasons. Well, that's actually not just it for tonight, but that's it for Savage Universe for 2023. Our first year of Savage Universe being live and streams is done. We're taking the next.
Wow. So I'm your anchor?
You're my anchor.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I anchored Swagtember, and now I'm anchoring 2023.
Yeah. So you just have to get the next book out by the end of 2024 so you can
Not
anchor 2024.
going to happen.
Okay, well, we'll be back the first Thursday in January, which is the 4th. And Alb is actually going to be back on the show because Fast Fun Furious February will be coming up, which is another creator jam where it's kind of a bunch of free products that creators in the Savage Universe are going to be contributing to. So we're going to have Alb on in January to kind of explain how you can get involved in Fast Fun Furious February, what the theme is, so that you have a month of lead time to start adding things to the Creator Summit in February. And then we're going to hopefully have some of you guys on there to talk about the cool things that came out of this thing. So from Peg, Merry Christmas. From Knights of the Smith Dinner Table, blessed Yule. Happy holidays. I'll just round it out here. Yep. Justin, thanks for jumping on and hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a blast as always. Enjoy your pizza.
I will. Everyone else, until next time, go play some Savage Worlds. Let us know how it's going, and may all your dice ace. We'll be back in 2024, first week of January. Until then, have a good one.
Happy New Year,
Billy.
Merry Christmas, Kwanzaa.